on that.
This meeting is being recorded.
There we go. Over to you, guys.
Cool. Right. Evening, everyone.
Hi, guys.
Most of you I've met in the past. So hello again. Either a show or one of these events. So yeah, going to be tying a couple of flies for you tonight. But most importantly, first of all, Yakida.
Hey, Gareth.
So
Just for you.
wet the whistle a bit. Right
Gareth,
then.
You'll need that after Saturday.
Yeah, I'm
You're
gonna
on
need-
Saturday. You'll need a beer.
Yeah, condolence spears, I think. So right, without further ado then, tonight, where are we? We are late February. In a week's time, or a week tomorrow, the river's open for trout here in South Wales. And on the Saturday, unfortunately, I can't get out on the Friday, but on the Saturday and the Sunday, I'll be fishing for trout. So what I thought I'd focus on tonight is early season trout flies. And really the ones I tend to use. They're sort of template flies, and we've talked about templates in previous sessions, but I'm going to run through my sort of 4 patterns, if we've got time tonight, that I use at this time of year. So give you a bit of background then. So my sort of home river is the River Usk. I'm the secretary of Gwent Angling Society as well for my sins, and a number of our waters at the moment, well, for the past month even, trout have been feeding on LDOs. You know, they're there. We've had a mild winter. Yeah, they've just been gorging. So not long off, we'll be seeing the March Browns. I think looking back last year, it was as early as the 7th of March, which was the first weekend of open season last year, that we had March Browns. So, you know, smaller sort of windows of the hatches, 12, 1 or 2, and then it would peter out, which, you know, makes everyone happy because I can get home and, you know, keep Mrs. happy and she's good, I'm good, I've had my fill for the day. We're all good there. So we're going to tie a March Brown pattern, and I'll flick through if I can share my screen. Can I? Derek, can you allow me to share?
Yeah, I'll swap it over now. There we go. That should be it.
There you go, mate. Brilliant. So
Ow.
hopefully you can see my screen. So we'll tie 4 patterns tonight if we get time. It's going to be first off the March Brown Emerger, and these are generally sort of noisy, lots of noise within the pattern, big footprint. I mean, the March Brown itself is a pretty big fly, right? And as we said, we kind of saw that we were having March Brown hatches from right at the start of March right through into the start of April as well. So, and again, it's not just the Usk. We've got a couple of rivers and waters close by that also see good hatches. But Usk, good early season river, and trout will take. It does take a lot of, you know, a bit of waiting. And again, my kind of goal is not to rush through a pool too early in the day, because, you know, if I get there at 9, well, I know there's not going to be any real dry fly action until 1-ish, right? And that generally is my game, right? Dry fly fishing. I don't tend to fish much through the winter, if at all. I haven't got out this winter at all, and I tend to wait until there's a hatch on. That's what does it for me. So March Brown then, first pattern of the day or the evening. Next up, we'll do a Grannom Emerger. So kind of similar, right? You can see it's got thorax cover, all that sort of stuff. But we'll talk about the pattern again as early as April 3rd last year. The thing with Grannom is they are kind of weather dependent, as I'm sure you're aware. You could, you know, the conditions could be quite similar one evening or one day rather, and then the next, for some reason, they're not on. And again, work permitting, right? If I miss the right weekend, they may have, you know, come off in their billions on a Wednesday. I'm not going to see it. So if I can, I tend to ditch the day job as frequently as possible in April, because these hatches can be monumental, absolutely crazy things where, you know, and you do get a bit of crossover as well between March Browns and Grannom. And if you get a year like that, then you may as well, you know, put your rods up and just enjoy the rest of the year, because the fishing ain't going to get any better. So that's good. And then what do we do around that, right? So we talk about those two major hatches, other than large dark olives, which are, you know, on the water through the winter. They're on the water now for sure. And then we get these two major hatches. In and around that, then my sort of go-to flies, again, dry flies, emergers, whatever we want to call them. We'll tie again tonight the CDC Chironomid Emerger. So it's just a generic midge pattern, but because of the sort of bugginess, the messiness, the noise within the pattern, it does lend itself really well to a lot of other small stuff on the water, right? Because again, it's just an impressionistic pattern, right? It's just bits of legs and things trying to burst free. And let's be honest, you know, the March Browns and the pretty upwings are the sexy ones, right? They're the rock stars. The midge and the emergers and the emerging stage rather are your sort of your underdog, but the easy target for trout. And you know, God knows they're the ugly ones, right? They're the legs and wings and God knows what bursting forth. So what we're trying to imitate there is the right size and the right amount of noise to sort of attract the trout really to take in this easy morsel. Obviously, we're targeting trout with them as well, right? We're not just, well, I'm not anyway. I'm not generally fishing blind. For that, I'll target faster water maybe for those more opportunistic fish with larger sort of Klinkhamer sort of patterns as well, just to try and bring them up. And then lastly, if we get time, we'll take another look at the Snow Shoe Hare Emerger, Bob Wyatt's pattern. And again, we'll dive into that as well. And we'll talk about the materials as well and how I fish them as well. So bear with me just a moment. Right then, so March Brown to start. So again, first major hatch of the year, right? What we're looking to kind of achieve a larger pattern, a bit more sort of noise on the surface. Again, footprint we're trying to mimic, but at the same time we want a quick sort of easier pattern as well, because again, this time of year I'm trying to fill my boxes a little bit, and these are all these four patterns are quite easy and quite quick to tie. All right, famous last words. Probably the thread's going to snap on me first tie this evening. But so yeah, March Brown then. So bear with me just a minute, and I'll just switch cameras and move the light. So hopefully I'm pinned for all of you. If I'm not, click the three dots next to me, or right click, depending on whether you're on a laptop or computer, and then just pin it, and it'll make the video a lot bigger. Right, so biggest pattern, right, for the camera. Hopefully you can see that fairly in focus. Let me
Yes, perfect.
There you go. If it does go to focus, or if I change things, right, then and you can't see it, tell me, and then we'll bring it back in. Let me just move that slightly to the side. Cool. Right, so first off, March Brown pattern, as we said, lots of CDC tonight. I use tons of the stuff, and in fact, one of my first stops at British Fly Fair this year, hopefully a few of you went, was Cooksil, because every year I kind of rinse him with CDC, which is what I'm after. So for this pattern, it's rather large, right? So I'm just gonna take 4 CDC fibers or feathers, sorry. Just doing this off camera, but I'll show you back on the camera in a second. And what I want to do is align the tips. So again, it's nice and gives me a bit of uniformity, I suppose. I will be 2 seconds while I line them up. And between these patterns, you don't really need much more than CDC, if I'm honest. So I'll line those up ready. Sorry, what was the question?
What hook is it you're using?
Right. So what we're looking to do is we could use a grub hook, but the grub hooks are kind of small, right? So we need something with an extended shank. Okay. So there's loads on the market. We've got the Partridge or Redditch Klinkhamer, perfect for that. It's quite a big, beefy hook as well, so it'll take a bit of punishment. This one's a TMC. What we're looking for is something light enough that fits the application of the dry fly emerger profile, right? So not something that's designed for a nymph pattern, because then it's just the wire gauge is just going to be too thick, right? So we just want that to be spot on, I suppose. So bear with me just a moment while I get my thread.
Is it a size 10, Gareth?
No, this one's a 14. So that's generally my go-to for a March brown. You can go up to a size 12 if you want. But 12s, 14s, certainly not a 16. Because again, this is a big beastie, right? So thread on, I use a lot of the Semperfly Nano Silks. It's bomb proof. Really tough, really good quality, and again, I use it for deer hair. This is an 18/0, but again, very little build-up, and really strong. So I'm just going to lay just a base of thread, because I'm going to be putting my CDC feathers in a second. And as I said, I took 4 feathers and I've just aligned the tips. Okay. Just going to clean that up slightly. And what I'm going to do, just measure the length, right? Length of the hook, length of the feathers, nice and simple. Again, keeps it uniform. And that generally gives you a lot of buoyancy for this type of pattern. Again, we're using a lot of natural materials. So we'll talk about that, because I know you guys have been talking about super fine dubbins today online or on the WhatsApp group. So we'll come on to some options around that today, this evening. So you might think, yeah, fairly big, but again, this is a big pattern, right? A big old monster of a Big Mac meal, and we want some noise on the surface as well. So again, the feathers, some are going to splay on the surface, some are going to stick, right? But again, the emerging wing, maybe emerging legs, there's going to be a lot of noise in this one. Plus, if you're fishing faster water, because the March browns the nymphs love the oxygenated sort of riffly faster water, right? But you'll see the hatches usually come off in the slacker water. That's because they sort of, by the time they've ascended and swam to the surface, they've been taken down by the current, right? So they've come out from the rocks in the faster, more oxygenated water, and then they're drifted downstream, essentially. And think of it from a trout's point of view. They're sort of sat on station in the softer, slacker, slower water, so less energy expended, and lots of protein and calories. So again, this is when those trout really put a lot of weight on. And even now, I think, Tim, you're a spoiled just like me. You know, some of the fish get really big that time of year. And it's amazing, because you get into April and they're bloody, they look like a June fish. You know, they're big yellow, they're quite fat, and you're like, Jesus, it's March, all right. They've got a couple of windows to eat, but still, you know, it's not an all day eat. But what they do get to eat is substantial. So I've just gone in with my scissors and I've cut at a V or an angle. So what I'm trying to do then is, as I always do, is incorporate the material underneath into that body, right? So I want a nice tapered body. So if I was to cut just shear, right, and just straight in, cut, you'd have a dip, right? And then, well, is it going to matter too much? Well, it's not going to look very pretty. And again, pride in your tie-in, right? So again, you know what it's like. If it looks crap in your box, you're never going to use it. So let me just unspin my thread, because it's spun up a little bit. So I'm just going to move the fly in the vise just for a moment. So I might go out of focus, but I'll bring it back. Yes, okay. Right, so tail, obviously this is an ephemera, so we've got tails. Do you need a tail in reality? I argue that you probably don't, because you know the fish are just going absolutely bonkers for these sorts of during these hatches. So I think if you stick a fag butt over their heads, they're going to take it in that instance. But again, early season fishing, it's the easy bit, right? Late season fishing, as we talked about on some of the videos and some of the demos I've done with you guys in the past, certainly last year, you know, you got low waters, you know, summery conditions, and it just gets pretty tough. So we aren't going to worry about that yet. So as long as we get a mild few weeks ahead, then fingers crossed. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I'll do. So coq de leon, you can use rooster if you want, cockhackle, whatever you got. Again, just some tails, right? Just keep it nice and simple. So 5 feathers or five fibers, sorry. In we go, and then I'm just gonna tie those in. Now I don't particularly want anything too long because again, this isn't an adult or done. This is a nymph, right? So I don't worry too much about the length there. So fairly shortish, right? This is a big old pattern, so I think I need to zoom out a bit. I've done a couple of demos lately, and it's all been, you know, size 20s and down. So that's always a problem getting in getting it in focus, let alone I'm going to worry about the getting it in the frame. So again, incorporate that into the body. I know where my thorax is going to start, so that's where I'm going to cut these fibers. And then I'm just going to run my thread back down so far, not full way, and then bring it back up. And I'm just starting to create slight taper. Again, a nice sort of carrot wedge. Because again, these are the tapered ephemera that we know and love. And then finally, last layer, back to the thorax. So I'm going to put a rib in. Now, again, does it matter? Probably not. Again, this is like the crack addict hatch of the year, right? They're all loving it. They're all on it. It doesn't really matter what you put over them, but I like to keep it, you know, segmented, and I like to follow the rules a little bit. So for this, I'm just going to add a little bit of flash, right? Because we've got potentially bloody tens of thousands of these flies coming off. And what makes it go for yours, you know? So maybe thinking, if I was a thinking angler, then maybe a bit of flash would maybe get them to turn to mine rather than the other 300 naturals which are on the water. So you could use anything for this. I'm using flat tinsel. This just happens to be called March Brown, fairly apt. So let's use it. Again, bit of flash. If you don't want to use flash, if you haven't got flash, not a problem. You can just use thread. You could even dub down to the tail and then wrap your thread back through just as a bit of security, a bit of segmentation there. Or of course, you could use biots. You can use stripped quill. Use whatever you want, right? The main thing with this pattern is the right size, the right silhouette, and to be honest, set color. I've talked in loads of demos, and I'm not a believer of color. Unless it's something big like, you know, a Danica mayfly, for example, where you've got to be a little bit more specific there. But again, with this, we're looking for messy emergence, right? They're taking the emergers or the cripples or the surface trap duns, right? That's what they're taking. They're not taking adults because once they break free, they're off into the trees or the grass or whatever. Yeah. It's easy, right? So just keep something nice, big in the box, and a 14 works well. 16 getting a bit small, I find, for the ones that we have, because look at that's on my thumb, all right, about the size of my thumbnail, and that's about what we get on the husk. If they're smaller in your neck of the woods, fine, time smaller. So next up, dubbing. again, I opt for dubbing because I think it adds a bit more messiness, spikiness. And for this, I'm using a snowshoe rabbit foot dub. It's not something I've made. It's out of the packet. It just happens to be, which one's this? Nature's Spirit. The dubbings are cracking. And what this gives me is a mix really of some snowshoe fur, and there's a little bit of guard hair in there as well. So we do get a bit of spikiness too. But what I'm looking for, nothing too spiky, because I kind of want it to break the surface or lay in the surface. But what I'm looking to do is form a bit of a rope, which is tight on the butt end and then a little bit thicker towards the back. Because again, I want to sort of create that tight profile, right, that the nymphs will have. So the color on this is like a rusty or brown olive. And again, when this gets wet, that's going to get dark, right? So again, color, okay. So again, easier to add than to take away. And that's the first bit of the abdomen done. So I can be a bit heavier with the dubbing now because we're getting into the thicker bulk of the body. This is going to look nice when we've got the segmentation and the rib running through it. So is that still okay focus wise for everyone?
Yeah, it's fine.
Cool. So again, I'm getting a bit thicker now. Hopefully you can see that as we go. Okay. So tight at the bottom, and the further up the thorax or into the thorax we go, then we're getting a bit thicker. Last year I was on one of our beats, and it's a beat we only got one rod on it, so if you get it, then you're in for a secluded day. And it was crazy, you know. You'd sit down, I had a coffee, it was pointless. I just watched the water for a couple of hours, literally a couple of hours, and then they just started coming off, and I was like, I was already strung up and ready to rock, but at the same time I was like, Jesus, there's thousands of them, where do I put my fly? It's the same every year, seems to be. Whether we're getting, well, we are, aren't we? We're getting milder winters and things are getting a bit warmer, but unbelievable. Right, so I'm going to take my rib. I'm just going to give it a loose wrap there because this always slips off. I don't worry about this getting chewed up in trout teeth, because literally, if it does, I tear it off and it doesn't make a difference. So I talked earlier about, you know, do the trout care about this rib? And initially, no, I don't think they do. Again, it's a bit of flash, a bit of extra pull, maybe a bit of extra pull to target our fly over the hundreds of others. And again, what you could do if you wanted to secure it, you could leave a little bit of thread at the bottom and then counterwind it, so you've got thread over the rib. Because again, this tinsel is not strong at all by any stretch. Neither is it meant to be, right? But again, some of my usual patterns, which I'll show you on the next one, is I use thread for the rib because it's a bit more, takes a bit more grunt. And remember, those larger fish are generally more what's the word, violent. They're larger. There's chance of gourd-sized fish with at that time of year. So, you know, we're talking teeth rather than, you know, little gummy fingerlings. Then, you know, they do get rather large. So bear that in mind. And again, this is why the choice of hook is really key as well, because again, you can get hit fairly hard. So all good there. So that's done. Next up, we're going to use a case cover, thoracic cover. Again, do the trout care? Do they even see it? Probably not. But again, for just to make it look a bit nicer, then I do like to use this stuff. So you've probably seen raffia synthetic straw. It goes by 1,000,001 names. So I'm just going to change cameras a second, just so I can show you the packet. Let me just move that out of the way a second. So this stuff Okay, it's synthetic. It's like a plasticky stuff. When you tease it open, you can see you've got this wide, massive piece of effectively just plastic, right? So let me zoom in. Zoomy, 2 seconds. And effectively, you can see what it is, right? Slightly translucent, which we don't really care about, but you can see it's way too big, right? I could fold this up and it'd be way too thick. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to sort of, I tie these all the time, right? So I kind of know the thickness I'm after. I'm after double the thickness of the thorax, right? So work out what the thorax width is. And then with your scissors, kind of go in and then make a cut. Okay. And what this usually does, I say usually, if I pull away, it comes off in one line. Right. So instantly we're down to what we kind of want thickness wise. What I'm going to do, because again, we don't want one, what's the word? We don't want it to be one width of the raffia, Swiss straw, raffia, whatever we want to call it. So I'm just going to fold it over my fingers. This is it's not tricky, it's just fiddly. So I'm just going to fold that over. So if this does get nicked by a trout's tooth, then we've got a bit of security in there, right? And then there we go. So there we are. All right. So that's two pieces essentially, because it's folded over. I'm just going to lay that on top. Okay. I don't want to sort of crowd the eye. Come on, thread. There you go. I'm just going to wind that back. So let me just see where we are. And again, just lift it forward if you want. Am I in the right place? Is the thorax the right size? That's fine.
Gareth,
Hello?
Rooney's asking what is the dubbing on the body?
The dubbing is a snowshoe rabbit foot blend. Can we see that? Snowshoe, rabbit foot, dubbing, rusty olive. You can go brown if you want. Usually you want. You can. So you guys were talking about super fine earlier. That's cool. Super fine's nice. I use it for dainty dry flies. However, remember earlier I said we're looking for a bit of mess. Well, look at that. This is what I want. I want mess. I want noise. So these bits, what we're trying to say is, you know, this fly is bits coming out everywhere, right? So we got wings, we got legs, we got gills, we got all sorts going on because it's an emerging nymph, essentially, right? It's just stuck in the film, or it could be stillborn, could be a cripple. These are the easy food targets. So you get, my thinking is if you get too slim a body, too neat a body, that's more your adult. All right. So it's done, it's been to the gym, it looks cool, it looks awesome. You know, it's doing all the selfies that the kids do. But this isn't, this is the ugly Joe, right? It's swam to the surface, it's bloody knackered, and it's trying to break free so it can get off before the bloody trout comes and nails it. Messy is nature's best, right? Easy targets, easy picking, and easy prey, right? So remember, we're fishing for predators at the end of the day. I say that like I'm fishing for some sort of pike, and it's a trout, I know, but they are, you know, pretty top of their game. So they haven't needed to evolve since the last ice age, have they really? So they're pretty good at what they do. Right, so it's only a couple more bits left to do. Just drop something. So you could change color if you want for the thorax. I'm not going to bother. So what I'm going to do now is take my same dubbing. I'm just going to lay a bed of dubbing, right? And we'll come on to the next bit. So what is it a bed for? We'll come on to that in a minute. That's the really ultra noisy bit. So I'm just going to put another dubbing rope on. I'm going to start at the head, right? Notice where I am. I'm just going to wind back because I want 2 layers of it. I'm just going to fill all the gaps in. And again, this isn't going to be a March Brown. You can do any emerger with this style, right? It's not. It's pretty easy. So what I'm going to do is just slowly just build up a bit of thorax, right? I want this to be trapped right in the surface. And again, I don't want it to be. I want it to be a bit more bulbous. So you know, like the real, the naturals. So I'm going to come so far back. Now at that point, I could have parked my thread at the front and then just tied this forward and tied it off, right? But again, I want a bit more noise, a bit more buoyancy. And again, this is all about that noise on the surface, you know, legs, all the ugly bits trying to break through. So I'm just going to clean up and chuck this dubbing away. Then I'm going to look for a larger sort of CDC fiber or feather. I keep saying fiber. Yeah, I'll do. Will it? I got a better one. Yes, I have. Right, so I'm going to take a feather. If I say fiber one more time, somebody kick me. And what I'm going to do is brush all the feathers back. I don't want too much of the wispy ones, so I'm going to get rid of those. So I've just drawn the, now I can say fibers, right? So I've taken the feather and I've drawn the fibers back. And let me switch cameras so you can see this bit, or have a better idea of what I'm trying to do. Right, one of these things, Mark Pettigen bulldog clippy thing, I don't know. They go for about, I don't know, £1 million, are they? Whereas you could buy a softer plasticky thing from, I don't know, we haven't got Woolworths anymore. So craft shop, I don't know, market, probably 50p or something. These things are mental, like 40 quid or whatever they were. But they do a really good job because they're very, they're quite soft on fibers. They don't make any sort of indentations or marks, and yeah, it's all good. So I'm going to take that, or my feather, and I'll put it in that. Simple, right? But what I want to do is line it up so that stem parts are hopefully, that's why I've got the camera, sorry. There you go. So hopefully you can see we've got the tool, we've got a feather stuck there now, right? And I'm going to trim as close as I can with my scissors to the stem, the rachis, the stalk, whatever you want to call it. So as you can imagine, one feather does 2 flies. So that will just sit, or as I've just done it, that'll just fall on the floor until I hoover on the weekend, probably. Right, so we've got it in there, okay? And we're gonna split the thread. So I need to first untwist it. So anti-clockwise spin, and then I'm just gonna take my needle, go in. It's not too far. And then I'm going to stab myself in the finger to split the thread. Okay, so hopefully you can see split. And then with the tool, I'm going to go in and just insert it as high as I can in the loop or in the split thread. And then there you go. And then clockwise, I'm just going to spin the thread back up, and hopefully on the camera in a second, you'll see this start to spin. So we don't want it too tight, but we want to really lock those fibers in. And if any have been sort of spun and trapped in, just go with me a fiber, that's fine. Right, and then I'm not talking touch and turns now, but we're just going to bring this forward and sweep these fibers back as I go. So open turns as we go, and then just bring that forward. And you can see the mess there, right? The noise, rather. I like a well-tied, messy fly, if that makes sense. So I'm just going to park the thread now underneath or behind the eye, so underneath the CDC feathers. What I'm going to do is just unspin the thread a little, because that thread's under a lot of tension at the minute. And again, by whip finishing, what I don't want to do is for that to snap. Even gel spun thread will snap eventually. So I'm just going to brush these fibers down, okay? So now I'm going to brush them down and back, because I don't want to catch any in. And then I'm going to bring forward this thorax cover, all right? So tidy as you go. I'm just going to do a loose wrap over the top and just park my thread. I'm just holding it, right? No hands, governor. I'm just going to bring that forward and just see how that looks. And that looks all right to me. Now, what I don't want to do is brush any of the wing back, but just those legs. Cool. So that looks all right. So I'm going to do 1 wrap, 2 wraps, and 3. That's all we need. And then just going to bring the whole lot back so I can see the eye. 1, 2, 3 lock in turns there. So that's going to kick the wing up slightly. That's fine. I don't want it vertical, but I don't want it straight either. And then to finish off, we have our whip finish tool. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Couple of pulls. Done. Go in your fiber. Why do I keep saying fiber? Go in with your scissors and just snip or slice. And I'm just going to bring this stuff out of the way and then just slowly go in with the tips and then rock it back and forth and snip. Right. So if there are any horrendously long ones, yeah, you can snip those if you want. I don't really mind again. So what we're looking for there, let me move the light a little bit, is this big, busy, noisy fly, right? So we talk about March browns, but again, yeah, it's not necessarily a March brown, right? You know, in smaller sizes, where we could talk LDOs, we could talk any ephemera, we could even talk, you know, in maybe a different color. Like I say, we can look at Danica as well, right? It's just a generic, noisy emerger, and this for me just does it all in those early season hatches. All right, so that's the first fly of the evening. So again, I tend to use like 5x 5-pound breaking strain tippets, because again, these fish just hit them sometimes with like reckless abandon. So we don't want to go too fine tippets, because again, it's not really the time of the year for that. Further and finer, definitely later in the year, but for this point, definitely you can be a bit more brutal, a bit more heavy with your tippets. So there we go. Any questions on that one? If not, I will remove him.
Gareth, was
Yeah.
the CDC, is it just the normal grey colour of CDC?
Natural, yeah. So it's a slight,
Natural. Natural.
greyish brown, right? So
Yeah, okay.
but
And
again, if you're fishing sort of faster, more broken water, you could probably get away with lighter. I mean, again, ideally it's sticking above, right? It's the floater, the buoyancy. So yeah, you can use whatever you want, really. I tend to buy it by the multiple bags.
Okay.
So
the other question I was going to ask is, I don't fish rivers, I only fish still water. So is it applicable to still waters as well?
don't see why not. Why not, right? If you get hatches of ephemera, hatches of midge, you'll always get midge on any waterway. So yeah, size it down. It's an emerger, right? If you fish dries on a lake, waterborne dries, they're going to come off, right? So this is just an emerger, or stillborn, or something stuck in the surface. So yeah, without a doubt.
Thank you.
Easy. Right. So next up is the Grannom Emerger. So talk about this one because it's slightly different. It's not your normal ephemera. So let me just get that out of the way. So it's going to be kind of similar, right? So we're going to be quite quick with this one. So this time around, where am I? 16, 14. Right. So Grannom, the first of the caddis. And again, we get these by it's bonkers. The size of hatches these can hatch in, right? So again, let me just move the camera a little bit, and we'll zoom back in on this one. So 14s, even 16s. This isn't a big fly, and you can literally pick this. Well, the fish eat the shucks as well, without a doubt, right? So they'll debody essentially, leave their shuck in the surface, and they are stuck to your waders, right? It's unbelievable. Grannom are amazing. There'll be billions of the buggers on there, and the trout just don't know what to do with themselves. They're jumping over each other. Again, if it crosses over with a March brown axe, just like Jesus, early season, it can be too easy. But again, then it kicks our ass, right? In the summer months, it's all a balance, and it does get ridiculously hard then. So again, smaller fly, right? In comparison to the last one, there you go. The body's about, well, almost double the size of that hook, right? So this is why the importance of the extended one there, because you're talking almost, well, just under an inch for that pattern, for the March brown. And then for a Grannom, which is a small caddis, again, if you look towards my thumbnail, then again about half the size, right? So it's not unrealistic to expect a 16 sometimes. So for this one, I used nano silk in white pretty much for all my tie-in, because when you pull tight or you tie off, it generally darkens up because it takes on either the color of something underneath it, if you're tying over something. But for this, I want a darker body, all right? And we'll come on to why in a minute. So again, grub hook again. So there's loads out there. So my favorites are either the partridge grub shrimp, the K4AS, which is a solid, absolute bonkers strong hook, but it's barbed. So I use again a TMC 2487, I think, something like that. The numbers are crazy. It's the curved barbless basically, and again, nice and strong, right? And again, because you're talking at such a volume of hatches or volume of flies, then again, my experience tells me that these fish are gonna grab them, because if they don't, their peer trout are going to. So either grab it while it's there or lose it. But again, there's another million to go for. So but hey, well, we're not trout, right? And neither would we wait in queue if they were giving out maybe free steaks or something. So that's the way I see it. So again, this is an 18-aught. Is it the 18-aught? Yeah, 30 denier. Again, nice and thin. This generally, I think, gets marketed as the thread for small flies, but it's not. It's low bulk, huge strength, and again, you can put one layer on, and it almost does nothing to the bulk of a fly. So I'll use this quite happily down to size 32s when which is I rarely fish these days, mainly for demos, just to show what good products and good tools can do. Again, you're talking zero bulk. So again, that's what we're looking for, right? So Grannom, right? So we got the curved hook, black thread this time. That's important on this pattern, because normally I use white for absolutely everything. It plays a role in this pattern. So I'm just gonna, what I like to do is take my thread down to where the base is gonna be, and then I'm gonna bring it back up. Again, open turns there. Right, so now I'm gonna take like a more traditional thread, like a wax thread. This is just, again, simplified because part of the team, but again, it's quality stuff. This one's the classic waxed, right? So it's more your traditional cottony fiber thread, right? I'm just going to take a bunch off because I'm going to use this as a rib. The 12-0, because I'm a trout man, I don't have 6-0s or 4-0s, which would work probably better in this instance. If I bought a spool of 4-0, I would only ever use it as a rib. So what I'm going to do is double it up. So you can see two pieces there. So we're double thickness, and then I'm going to double it over again. You probably can't make out the 4 pieces there, but we've got 4 times 12-0, right? Somebody work that out for me. I'm not going to. Well, probably 4-0 actually, right? So, or 3-0 rather. So I'm just going to bring that up and under the thread rather than try and lock it in, because I'm never any good at that. So I'm just going to tie that in, and I'm going to tie that back all the way back to the base, or to the curve rather. Okay, I'm just going to park that in my little springy fly tidy thingamabob. See, I do a lot of tying. Everyone always asks what tool you using there. I'm like, I don't know, one of those spinamabob things, whatever. My Glasgow angling catalog came through yesterday. I'm like, God, anybody taking up fly fishing must be absolutely mind blown at all these tools we apparently use. And well, I don't use half of them, but yeah, maybe chuckle. Mrs. just looked at me like an idiot, but there we are. She does that a lot. So black rib all the way down to the bottom. Now for the body, if you kind of pick up any book that talks about granum, they usually say something like either a light olive or a yellowy olive or a dirty yellow. Dirty yellow I like. The adult, when it hatches, well, if you're imitating adults, in my personal opinion on the husk, you're fishing them too late. It's not my, well, I didn't start that opinion. You've had Mark Roberts from Gwent tie in the past year as well, and he's one of my mentors from years back. And still a good friend. But so Mark and our colleague also on committee in Gwent, Dave Collins, came up with a fantastic caddis pupa pattern, which was designed to imitate granum specifically. So what I'll do, I'll send a lot of links in the group as well tonight, as well as those pictures I posted earlier. And then yeah, it's just, you know, extra reading if you're interested. So he kind of, well, he's a dry fly fisherman, very much like myself. He's very studious. Well, he's a doctor, right? Retired doctor from in the science realm. And so he's very studious, very academic in the way he approaches things. And he harvested a fish, which is rare for Dave. I think he was doing a bit of a study. So, you know, we do allow fish limits. So he took a takeable fish. And the amount of granum in this pack, he was spewing them up. It just had so much pupa within it. And he looked at the colors, and again, it was almost like a off lime color. It was, yeah, again, the pictures are all in the article. Have a good read. I'll post them this evening. And he came up with a fantastic pattern. It had wing buds, which were CDC feathers drawn through varnish and then left to dry. And again, you can do like, you know, 100 while the rugby's on the weekend, because you're not going to be paying attention because we're going to be playing a bit crap probably. But again, you know, it's all this prep work going into these flies. So I've kind of used that pattern as my go-to, but again, I want quick, ready, and again, comes from probably when I was guiding for 10 years. You want quick, reliable patterns which you can bash out and are going to work and imitate and are noisy and messy and the right size. So I kind of stripped off a couple of things, like, for example, the wing buds, so I don't bother too much with those. The rest is pretty much like Dave ties his. But again, for the full tie-in, again, it'll be in the link that I send. So this dirty sort of olive then, Semperfly do this sparkle dubbing. Can you see that? Probably not. Semperfly sparkle dubbing box, right? And it's the light olive. I don't know whether I can get, you'll see it better on the voice, but light olive is the closest I've come to. And the sparkle effect, it's almost translucent, right? So it's not like again, it's not, you could do superfine that'd be okay, possibly. The thing with superfine is it builds up, but it is quite fine. So the key here is this black thread. We want that to kind of come through, and that gives it the dirty sort of yellow that I'm looking for, right? And this is one of the rare occasions where I kind of think that color is a trigger. So I'm just going to tease out some of this dirty olive, or light olive, sorry. And I'm not going to go too heavy with it. So again, like any synthetic dubbing, which I don't use a lot of, other than like Danica and those sorts of patterns, and this one where I want color, I use a lot of natural, so they're easier to dub. So I'm just going to take a bit on. You'll notice that the end is still rather messy, which I don't care about in a minute. So I'm just going to catch it in, because again, it's synthetic, right? It's slippery by design or by nature. And I'm just going to start thin, And I'm just going to bring it forward. And I want to build slightly the thickness. Now, this isn't an upwing. It's not an ephemera. So it's not got that sort of carrot-shaped taper all the way through. Has to start with, because it's a caddis, right? So it's going to be like a bulbous, more, not like a gnat or anything like that. But if I bring this forward there, what I'm trying to do is, the closer I'm getting up the thorax, I'm starting to tighten again, because it's more of a bulb than it is a tight sort of, you know, sexy carrot shape taper. So you can even start to tease some of this out. Notice I'm tightening now as I'm going back towards the butt end. And I want the thickest bit to be there, just there in the center of the abdomen. And a tiny bit more. I just want to cover the thread. I don't want to leave any of that black. But again, this is another sort of go-to sort of template fly, I suppose, when fish are on Grannom. And tidy it up. We're going to stick a rib over this as well, so that will neaten it up slightly. No, I don't like that. It's not neat enough. There we are, that's better. Right. So now the rib. So I'm just gonna move this in the vise slightly. So bear with me just a minute. I'm just gonna twist this up because I don't want it to lay too thick, but I want it to be uniform, right? So I'm just gonna hold that, twist it, and I'm gonna take my hackle pliers and just stick that on the end, just so I'm gonna worry about pinching it to death. And we're just gonna do fairly wide open turns. Just bringing that forward in open turns, and then just tie that off. You can see that splay straight away there. So again, just incorporate that into the body. Job done. Now, the key here is we want this to pierce the surface, right? Now, by default or by nature, the synthetic material is quite spiky, which is great because we're going to use a different color in the thorax in a minute. But we want it to puncture the surface straight away. We don't want it. We want it suspended. We don't want it sort of all in the film. So I'm just going to tidy up those spiky bits, and then we're onto the thorax. Now, as before, I'm going to use raffia, synthetic straw, whatever we want to call it. However, I don't have black, and the natural has a black thorax. So what I'm going to do is take my brown and one of these. I'm just going to color it nice and simple. So bear with me a moment. I could have said here's one I made earlier, but I didn't prep. I'm sorry, chaps. So I'm just going to take it, place it on a bit of card. This is when I get black all over the body of the fly, right? So got to be careful. So if you can do it in advance, do it in advance. Just watch those fingers on that body, otherwise you just ruin the fly. So exactly the same as before. I'm going to take exactly the same piece that I used. I'm going to fold it over, and I'm going to take my black Swiss straw, and I'm just going to taper the end so it's easier to tie in. And tie it back. Good. Okay. Next up, a wing, as you saw in the picture. So again, what I'm doing on this one is we've got two ways we can tie the CDC in, right? So the last one I wanted to incorporate it into the body to give it that sort of thick to thin profile, right? But as we said, we're thinner now at the shoulders essentially, rather than as we were before, thicker at the shoulders and then dropping down to the tail. So now I just want to have a bit more control over this. Now, smaller fly, so we'll go for 3 feathers this time. Again, I just wanted to align the tips. And again, for that size, that is about right. Just take my thread back a little bit. There we go. So we're almost done. We've just got to put the thorax in now. For this one, we're going to use similar, the same material, the sparkle dubbing. But what we're going to do, so again, you'll see this when you read the article. I'm going to take a pinch of orange. And I'm going to take a pinch of black. Now, the dominant color there is black. But you'll notice on the natural, if you're lucky enough to get them, that there will be a slight tinge of orange. So I'm just going to mix some of this black and orange, okay? And I'm going to use that to just form a dubbing rope. Let's take that bit off. It's fine for now. And again, much like the other one, I'm just going to start at the shoulders essentially, or the rear of the fly, and I'm going to dub forward. And what you can do when you get to the base, or to the front, sorry, if you find you need a bit more orange, then you can just add a bit. There we go. So you could use seal's fur for this, but of course, as it's sort of not as readily on the market anymore, then this stuff is pretty good at as a substitute. So I'm just going to snip this rope off because again, it's synthetic. It's, you know, really long, strong fibers. So again, you need to snip that one. They don't tease out very well. So hopefully you can see we've got a bit of a mix there. You can probably see some of the orange just poking through, and that's as much as I want, right? I don't want a huge amount of orange, but at the same time, the black are the color of the legs and whatnot, right? So let's make sure that thorax cover is sitting correctly. Again, much like the last one, just a loose wrap over and just take a look, see how it looks. That's okay. 1, 2, 3. Brush the whole lot back. And then we will do a whip finish in a moment. For the eagle-eyed among you, my thread just snapped. Told you it would tonight. So a quick fix job. and then we will get on to the next pattern. I'll just tidy this up and then we will take a look at the fly. So 2 seconds while I snippy. So I'm just going to take this thorax cover off. So exactly like the last one. I'm just going to give this a bit of a tidy on the top. And then what I'm going to do, that is in slight out of focus. Let me just move this slightly. And I'm just going to pick out some of the fibers. Again, we want a bit of impression of legs. Again, not talking loads, but just about. And again, if they're too big, because again, synthetics tend to be rather long in the fiber, then again, just give them a slight trim, right? But again, that's plenty of noise there. We're looking at a noisy sort of pattern again, if I can bring that into focus. So again, does it on all fronts, right, when it comes to Grannom. So not a big fly. What did I say? 14 curved hook. And again, that bulbous sort of body as well will do you well. So again, when the fish are on, it does really well. When there's a crossover of March Browns and Grannom, yeah, you can pretty much stick anything on, I think, and you're good to go. So there we go. Any questions on the Grannom at all?
Gareth, with the this synthetic raffia, if you haven't got any of that, could you use natural raffia and color that with a felt pen?
Yeah, I think you can pretty much, as I said, because that sits on the top of the pattern. Would the trout really see it? Possibly not, right? So do you even need it? And there'd probably be an argument not to. But if you want to, like I do, then absolutely great. You could probably use pheasant tail fibers, 4, 5, 6 of them, and then just bring them forward. Again, they're a little delicate when it comes to trout teeth. This is a bit more hard wearing, not much, because again, if a trout tooth does nick it, then it'll just come off. And I fished them when they're hanging off, and it just still seems to work there. So yeah, it's your call. If you've got raffia, something like that, use it. See how it goes. But yeah, have a play, give it a go. And let me know how you get on. Okay, let me just move that out of the device. So there you go, we're on the hour, so we're halfway, I think. Is that right, Derek? 2 hours?
Yeah,
Good.
we've got unlimited time, so it don't matter if it rolls over.
I'll be sending people to sleep if I go too far over. Right then, so the next one, some of you have probably seen it before because I use it all the time, regardless time of year. If I do fish in the winter, again, I'll try and find some rising fish, and this is usually the fly I'll use. I wrote a piece recently, or was it last year, on this pattern. So again, I'll include that link, and it just goes into why I use it and how I fish it. So this is a midge imitation, although, as I said at the start, it's generally any sort of size 16, 18 emerger. And again, it's messy, really quick to use. Only a few materials. It does have its cut off and sealing because you can only get so small with it. And then the materials don't really work. And you've got to flip to something synthetic then, which is more of a smaller pattern material, right? So again, mentioned earlier about getting down to size 32s. Rarely do I fish 32s. I will fish 24s, but I don't fish 32s. They're just, too small. And fish welfare and snip, tippet pings and whatnot. It's just, I kind of did it for a bit and then, fish first. But again, it's how you use the right materials for the right size flies. Obviously, you can bash on a ton of dubbing or whatever, but as the size of the flies decreases, you're thinking about every single wrap of thread. the specific materials that you're using. So again, is this the right material? It might look okay to me, but it might add too much bulk, or it might take on too much water, and then all of a sudden the fly or your imitation of that fly isn't doing what you need it to do specifically. So the drift might be wrong. It might be sitting in the wrong elevation. It could be sitting in the wrong part of the film even. So we talk about water column when we're fishing nymphs. Well, okay, is it foot, 2 feet, 3 feet? With some flies, it needs to be in a specific part of the surface film rather than, 1 foot, 2 foot, 3 foot. So again, it's correct application of tools, materials for what you're trying to imitate, right? We're trying to get, or all we're trying to do is put stuff that looks like food out to a trout that's feeding on that food without spooking them. That's what we're trying to do, right? So again, it's not just about the fishing, it's about the flies you use as well. Well, more about the fishing, and it's absolutely about the drift. If you don't get that right, you could have a perfect fly on the end. But again, it's A to B to C, hopefully gives you D. So not lastly, ultimately then we've got the CDC Chironomid or midge emerger. So Chironomidae, the kind of look like mosquitoes, right? But they don't have the bitey bits. So they're the non-biting midge family. So a friend of mine, got to be more than 15 years ago. It's a shuttlecock, right? And I think I've tied it before. So if anyone's bored, tell me to shut up and I'll get on with the next one. But this fly, again, it's just a go-to. And I kind of want to show you a couple more materials, thanks to Mr. DeVille, which I've been playing around with. So this time, let me move my camera a little bit now because we're going to be a bit closer. So for the camera, I'm going to use, well, no, not for the camera. We'll use a 16, which is my kind of go-to for this pattern. When people say midge, or I say midge, people think, oh, it's got to be tiny, and it's really not really. It's a small body, but the midge on the husk aren't, the tiny things, not the ones that I'm talking about anyway at the moment. Summer months, you can't even see what they're taking, and this pattern for me is my sort of confidence pattern. So again, curved hook. I don't think I use a single straight dry fly hook in this demo, but again they're stuck in the surface, they're easy prey, right? Which is what we're trying to imitate. So let me just clear up, because if you could see my desk right now, it's a state. So a couple of materials. I'm going to use traditional sort of more wax thread this time around. Again, because I'm going to incorporate that color into the body. It could be anything. And it doesn't even need a body, if I'm honest. I've seen other guys who've said, "Oh yeah, I've taken your midge pattern," and it's not mine. It came from a friend of mine who fished the husk. It's too much what we're doing. So I just want to mount the thread there. So he fished the husk, gave me a couple of these patterns, over 15, 16 years ago, and it's just shuttlecock, right? But I've kind of added some flash to it, and it just works in kind of like any situation, really. So what I'm going to do is sort of mount my thread, and I'm just going to unspin it ever so slightly because I want to flatten the thread out just a little bit. That is going to allow me, in touch and turns, to wind backwards. I'm going to lay down a flat body. All right, and then again in touch and turns, I'm just going to come back to where I want the thorax to be. Okay, so I'll come back to the front of the thorax, and then I'm just going to spin back up slightly. So I don't want to go to the top of the eye, and you'll see why in a second. Let me bring that back in. So now then, I showed, it might be worth showing you this a second. Bear with me just a moment. The adults have fairly long wings, right? So let me just show you a picture a second. Savey. And I don't tend to see them eating the midge very often, if I'm honest, because well, I just don't know why, but I see I see the adults in the air. All right, you see them on your waders when there's a good midge hatch on. Generally, again, back to what we said earlier, right? We tend to see them taking the emergers because they're kind of easy prey, right? So hopefully you can see my screen in a second. Where are we? So I'll get somebody to say a thumbs up just so they can see it. So here we've got an adult, right? You can see the length of the wings are almost as long as the body. All right. So what we're trying to imitate is this, but in the emerging, slightly smaller form. So hopefully you can see that image on your screen. If not, again, I'll send a link to an article on this and you can take another look. So yeah, if we jump back to my camera, then hopefully you can see my camera there. So again, what we're not trying to do is imitate the adult, which has the full length wings. What we're trying to imitate is, well, two things, right? Wing buds, and also, for those of you who know Grannom Hughes, I got talking to him in a pub a million years ago, and over a Guinness or 4, he started telling me about this midge hatch he had in his house, and I'm like, what? It was a midge hatch in his house. But Grannom did, because it was all part of a bit of a trial, a bit of an examination, if you will, where he put some midge larvae into his fish tank, and they hatched. And what he noticed was, when a midge larva wants to sort of swim up in order to hatch, essentially it hits a button, right, which then inflates this life tube thing. Effectively what it is a bubble, right, or some form of gas, and then that lifts it so it doesn't actually swim. It might direct it, but it's like this, yeah, you know, like these divers, they hit a, you know, life jacket and it takes it back up, and when they hit the surface, more importantly, this little bubble breaks, pops, and it leaves almost like an oily residue in the surface film. And I thought, oh, how cool is that? So I kind of tried to maybe incorporate that. Now, I don't know whether this has any positive effect on the fly itself, but again, when we talk about confidence patterns, I will levitate towards this pattern over pretty much anything, right? And generally in a 16, it just tends to work for me anyway, right? We've all got our favorites, and I think if you've got your own favorite, you're just naturally going to fish it more better, essentially. I don't know what it is, you know, that if somebody gives you a fly that you've never fished ever before, maybe if you're a fly dresser, for sure, you're going to look at it and go, well, I didn't tie this. So instantly it could be one of Tim's flies, right? And I absolutely look up to Tim as one of my heroes in fly tying. But because I didn't tie it, there's something in my head that thinks, well, there's something just doesn't sit right. It could be any one of anybody who's tied on in the Ludlow group, you know, all amazing fly dressers, people I look up to, but for some reason I wouldn't have fished their flies correctly. You give me one of these dirty little things, and for some reason I'm like, yeah, cool, I know what I'm doing. I've got the bit on the end that's I don't need to worry about, and I've tied and blah blah blah, and all I need to worry about now is the cast, which, you know, more often than not I've flunked, but there we are. It's another story. So what I'm trying to do here with this now, what I've used for a long time is this stuff to create the wing buds, essentially, and also maybe the idea of the oily like residue, right? So it's a braid, you can see there, it's a multi-strand braid thing, and it fluffs up quite nice. You can see on the end here that's fluffed up, and that's what I'm going to try and use. But to show you a couple of other options, so Mr. DeVille, thank you very much. We had a chat a while back, because this stuff is kind of thick, right? We talked about those correct materials. The smaller you get. So if I tied a size 20 with this stuff, it's too thick, right? So thanks, Paul. So Paul sent me a couple of things. This one's a Vineyard pearl braid, and you can see in comparison, can you? It's a little bit, well, take my word for it, it's a little bit thinner, right? So this one's thinner. What else? What other goodies did he send me? We've got this Madeira metallic. The Madeira I normally have is in a wine bottle, but this stuff is awesome. Look at that. And again, it's multi-strand, it's thin. Again, can take you down to the real small stuff. Awesome. And then lastly, there's another offering from Samplify, and this stuff is, where is it? The body, I think it's rebranded now. It's body and rib. So body and rib. So it does both. But this stuff is more for, if I was to tie it in maybe a size 12, you know, maybe a larger detached body, that would be good. But definitely for your 16s, this stuff is bonkers nice. So I'm gonna use that one tonight. So this one is Paul Madeira metallic. Oh, cool. Thanks, Paul. Got all the details on there as well. So there you go. So this stuff now, what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna make a straight cut. All right. So hopefully you can see that straight. So that allows me then to do a pinch and loop. Tie that in loosely, and I'm just going to pull that back through. So again, I don't want to crowd the eye, right? I'm going to pull it back through. I'm just going to give it a couple of wraps, and that's it. I'm just going to cover that, take my thread forward. I'm just going to leave that there. Now, obviously, the length of this, can I take a bit of light off that? The length of that is crazy long, right? So I'm not going to, I'm going to snip that at the end, quite short actually. So I'm just going to leave that there for now, though. Just make it a bit easier to tie. And then back to my CDC. So I'm going to take, my go-to is 3 feathers. So bear with me while I totally go through a lot of this stuff. 1 feather, 2 feathers. So again, just off camera, I'm just lining them up. And there's another nice feather. You'll do. So I'm going to take my 3 feathers, again, hopefully lined-ish. And again, this one hasn't got to be too long. So again, length of body for length of the wing. And I'm just going to give it 1 loose turn, make sure it's in the right place. And then bring that forward. So again, I just want that to be the back of the thorax area. So I'm just going to move this up in the vise slightly. Hopefully that's still in. Yeah. Everyone still see that okay? Is that sharp enough?
Yeah.
And what I'm going to do now is, we're almost done. I'm going to take some squirrel. Can't see with these glasses on. Where's my squirrel gone? There it is. So what we're looking for with this thorax is, again, if you remember the picture, is something quite spiky, right? Again, you can use hare's mask maybe, which again, you can have some nice guard hairs. Squirrel though, gray squirrel in particular is awesome because it's just all spiky. It's not as easy to dub in a dubbing rope because it's just all spikiness. I'm just going to take that out of the packet and then leave it on the side for a second. So again, we're going back to a split thread. Again, this is a bit easier to split because it's thicker thread, a bit easier to work with than the GSP or the gel spun nano style silks. So again, hopefully you can see two legs there. So that's split. I'm just going to take some of this squirrel, and all we want is a pinch. That is it. I'm just going to close this thread. What I'm going to do before I start spinning, I'm just going to spread this out just a little bit. Because again, I don't want a big clump. I want a nice even spread of squirrel fibers, squirrel guard fibers. So again, hopefully you can start to see that spinning. Again, if we've got any fibers there in the fur that are caught down, so again, I can pick those out while it's before it's been spun rather. And again, touch and turn. So I'm just turn, brush, turn, brush. Okay. Yeah, that's about the right amount. And then again, unspin, because again, that's under a lot of pressure right now. If I was to finish that, it probably wouldn't last very long. And then again, brush the whole lot back. And that is it. So again, give it a slice. Really gutted this year that the fly fair, I didn't take my scissors because can't remember the chap's name, but he does the sharpening service. A couple of you guys got it done, I think. But he is awesome.
He made a cracking job with my scissors.
Good. No, he's really good. He's worth the money as well. What is he charging now, Dad?
Charged me a tenner.
Tenner per scissors, is it?
Yeah, well, he charged me a tenner for mine.
Yeah, he's brilliant. Really, really good.
That's Simon Scissors, Gareth.
Simon, that's it. Owen, yeah, brilliant.
Yeah.
I think he does it via the post as well. But
Yeah, he does. He done a few pairs of me there several years ago before I got the copper scissors.
right. Oh, okay. I might have to look into that.
He does a great job.
Yeah, he really does. I always used to use aluminium foil. So you fold that 4 times and then just cut through it 10 times, and it does a really good job.
Do you know what we used to use? Do you know
Yeah.
your apple tart? The aluminium on the apple tart.
Yeah,
Fold it twice, 3 times. They're so hard.
that's it.
Cut it 4 or 5 times.
That's it. Yeah, and it does sharpen them
Really,
back
really
up.
good.
But I told that Simon I used to do that, and I think he fell off his chair. He was just horrified because of
Well,
course he does all the high end like hairdresser salons. So they'll bring their £1,000 set of scissors and he'll sharpen those up. So when I told him that, yeah, just use aluminium foil and cut through it, he was like, no, what are you doing? So I don't know, it works, but yeah, I'd rather pay him a tenner. Right, so we're just going to finish up. I'm going to brush all my squirrel fibers forward because I want them out of the way. And then I'm just going to take my scissors and I'm just going to run them up behind the CDC stumps. All right. So that's going to give us, well, not much in terms of buoyancy, right? But it's going to add to it. And then I'm going to take this braid and I'm going to go about half the way down the body because again, it's the idea, if we call it that, the idea of a wing sac, right, or wing buds. And then I'm just gonna brush these guard fibers back, right? So again, what I've tried to do here is give the idea, that's a good word, that the idea of legs, right? So stuff bursting through. Now on this camera on the video, you're not going to get in too tight, right? But I'll send these images later so you can see a bit more clearly under a proper light. But that is basically it. So if I try and move that light out of the way, maybe that would be a bit better. But you can see the idea of wing buds. The idea that when it bursts through the surface, again, the buoyancy with the CDC, you've got the idea of a body, although other people have tied this and they don't even bother with the body, which is cool, right? So people have adopted it and they made it their own as well, which is awesome. So it's literally tie on wing buds, if you even need those, a bit of CDC and a bit of spiky stuff over the top. And I guarantee you, so when the query earlier was I don't fish rivers, I fish still waters, use this. If there will be midge there, midge will live in a bowl, in a bucket, in a bit of water on the side of the street. They will live it wherever there's water, right? And easily. And yeah, if you've got dry fly fishing on that lake, that reservoir, try these because I guarantee you they do well. You might want to up the size of them because midge on still water is a little bit bigger. But again, even at distance, you can kind of get away with seeing these. You know, if we're talking broken fast water, then all right, it's not designed for that, right? But on skinnier, shinier, slacker water, fantastic. If you then get up into the head of a pool, and you've got a little bit faster water, then yeah, you can just get away with it. You could up the number of CDC feathers, and that'll do just fine. But I guarantee you, well, this is my sort of go-to pattern, one of anyway, which is a small number of patterns. So there we go. Really, really good river pattern, and I guarantee you that'll do well on a still water as well. So there we go. So
Gareth, what size hook, please?
So I tend to go for let me just switch my camera so I can talk for the next couple of minutes. So I use a size 16. 16 is my go-to for that pattern. I do use 18s, you know, if they get really small, down to 20. But then when we talked earlier about the materials that you use, CDC in very, very small pattern sizes, it kind of struggles, right? So then you need to look at other winging or buoyant materials because it just doesn't sit right. But yeah, 16 is a go-to. You know, you think of midge as these microscopic things, and they're not that small. Certainly not when they're trying to break and burst the surface. You know, as we said, there's like, you know, all these bits trying to, you know, it's just this mess on the surface. So again, if it's where the trout expects that to be, and it's not put off and it's not spooked, why wouldn't it feed? That's their sole job in life: feed and breed. So it's going to eat it, right? If for some reason it's spooked or it's just off, somebody else spooked it, why would it be off the feed? You know, you know as much as me. So yeah, it's just good 16, 18. I don't tend to use them in 20s, if I'm honest. I don't find it needs it.
Okay, we have buzzers on our local still water up to about size 10. Those are the pupa.
That's big.
Yeah, that's big. So what size, if I wanted to use an emerger like this, what size would you recommend?
How do you mean? For your water?
Yeah. No,
What?
yes, for my water.
Right. So if if you want a 10, a 10 curved duck's going to be pretty heavy, right? It's going to need lots of buoyancy.
Yeah.
I would, that's a tough one because I've never tied them in 10s.
Okay.
As long as you can find an appropriately sized gauge of wire, the hook needs to be branded as a dry fly hook, right? If it's a curved sort of mid, no, if it's a curved nymph hook, it's not going to work. It's just going to be sunk every day. But stick to so the partridge, grub, shrimp, that's pretty good. That's kind of thin, still down in the lower numbers, in the higher sizes. Sorry, or the bigger sizes. The TMCO 2487, that holds its gauge relative to its size, so it's not going to jump, you know, from 16, 18s being really small to like 12s being huge. Have a play around. That's a good question because again, I don't get them in size 10s.
Sorry, it's an awkward question, but you know, we get them that size. Yeah, okay, that's great. Thanks, Gareth.
That's really good. Well, you could try looking at, again, you know, we talked about wrong camera. I'll put it on when we switch now, but those extended shank hooks. So you might have like a, for example, it could be a size 12, but like a 2X. So you're going to get the same gauge as a size 12 because the gape is a 12, for example, but you might get that length because it's a 2X. That would be my first recommendation. So keep the size, but get a 1 or 2X. That'll give you the length you need, but the gauge of the wire will be relative then to what you want from like a 16, something like that.
Yeah. Okay. Have you got those hooks? You've got them there. What are they? Can you?
Yeah, sure. 2 seconds.
Yeah.
Let me move that. So there's a couple that I use, and again, they're all strong stuff, right? So my kind of go-to grub hook for dries is, and it is branded as a grub, scud, shrimp, but the wire is
grub shrimp. Okay,
grub
thank
shrimp,
you.
K4AS, right? And again, these are
K4AS,
solid, right? I've had big fish on these, and they just do not bend. I can't big those up enough. If you're after a barbless version, because eyefish barbless, then
Yeah.
these, let me put it that way. There you go.
2487. Okay. Yeah.
And the BL just barbless, right? So
Yeah.
they go down pretty small, down to 20s and whatnot as well. So they're pretty solid as well.
Yeah.
But between those partridges, the bomb proof, the gauge of the wire is pretty thick. Is pretty fine. So exactly what you're looking for. And I'm quite a fan of the straight eye that has as well. So I don't know whether you can see those. It's a straighter eye.
Uh-huh.
I quite
Yeah.
like the bronze look on it too. It's quite a nice hook there. So there we are.
Thank you.
Okay. Perfect. So we got another 30 minutes or so. I'll try and stay to time. And give you your evenings back because no one likes listening to me all day long. So let me move this light.
I don't mind, Gareth. I've a quarter of the bottle nearly drank. So you keep on going. I keep drinking.
Yeah, good man. Good man. Right. So last one. And again, if we talk about confidence flies, another one for early season. And I think I might have done it last time, right? Or a while back. I think back in May. So let me just get a couple of bits and bobs out. Oh God, CDC is everywhere tonight. That's the only thing. So we need two things for this one, excluding thread. We need one of them, right? And one of them. So it's all rabbit. Well, rabbit and hare, right? Well, snowshoe hare. So we got 1 foot and 1 face, and that's going to do everything. I'm going to go back to white. So nano silk in 18 aught, 30 down here. Strong as anything, and it ain't gonna snap. Well, I snapped one earlier, but there we go. That was my misdoing, not the thread. Right, so Snowshoe Hare Emerger, right? You've heard of the DHE, or the Deer Hare Emerger, Bob Wyatt. Again, I'm a big book fan. So you've got trout hunting. Where's what trout want? Bit of an updated version of Trout Hunter because this is pretty old now. If you can even get it anymore. What's that? It's got to be 90s or something, is it? 2004, right? So again, 20 years old now. What Trout Want came out a few years back, was it? Again, better pictures, 2013. Bloody hell, 10 years ago. It's a sign of getting on, isn't it? So yeah, he sort of, his patterns are just up my street anyway. They're not for everyone, because we've all again got our favorites. But the Deer Hare Emerger I used a lot of. But it's deer, or it's the animal deer, it's cheap as to make. And it just took a bit of work to get it floating again when it eventually, hopefully, you've had a couple of fish on it. So the Snowshoe Hare Emerger is a lot, I find, more resilient. You haven't got to worry about deer hair breakages because it can be a bit more brittle, right? Snowshoe, a couple of blows, and you're literally back on. I do use desiccant powder as well. I grease it to start with. But I think from a resilience point of view, if I was to choose 2 flies, I would choose the Chironomid Emerger that I just tied. That for your more slacker, softer waters, where you might want to go down smaller, trout a bit more, they'll come up, they'll follow it back, and they'll either take it or they'll just go back to their lie. If I'm fishing a bit more faster water, a little bit faster, a little bit more broken maybe, I need something that I can see at distance, whereas, that soft CDC based fly isn't going to cut it because 1, you probably won't be able to make it out in the more noisier water, and 2, CDC in fast water, you'll have to really up the tufts to keep it up, and that's not really what it's designed for. So the Snowshoe Hare Emerger is just banging. So one of my heroes for snowshoe tying is Kevin Muir. I think he's been on a couple of these, or he's a watcher on some of these. He's on Fly Tyers Row most years at the British Fly Fair, and as I wasn't tying this year, it was awesome. So I got to actually ask people to show me how they tie their flies, because normally Tim will know, you just stuck behind the vise. I know him. We're stuck behind the vise for all day. You look at your watch, 3:30, you haven't eaten anything yet, and you're still you're still talking. So there's no time to even see the show, to see your other, peers, your friends, all these awesome fly dressers that you admire and look up to, and you can't even talk to them. And then you're back at the pub again, and we're all talking trout, and you don't actually get to see, or rather getting drunk than talking trout. So yeah, awesome this year. So I got to really sit down. I asked him, right, can you for once show me how you tie yours? Because yeah, he's the king as far as you got Bob Wyatt, right? Who's the king? He's obviously the designer, and then like literally just a notch down, you got Kevin Muir, right? He's an awesome guy. And again, give me loads of hints and stuff over the years, and a really good tire. So for this pattern, if you're interested, it's a good book generally. As I say, this is as a bookie. So this book, Tying Emergers, if you can see that. All right, great book. In there is it's quite early on, I think. There's a piece on Snowshoe itself, and it was kind of a good tip. I've talked about Snowshoe in the past to loads of people, and this kind of, when I read it, it kind of, no, I can't find it. I'll send you the page number, but it talks about the foot, right? And you've got 3 sort of regions. So if I turn the foot upside down, so you can see the bit that's cut, right, the leg. We'll turn it upside down so the pad is on the bottom. You've got the first section, which is the real coarse guard-like hair, right? It's not going to give you much in terms of buoyancy, right? The middle bit, you've got a bit of a mix of some underfur and some guard furs, and then this bit at the back, this is the sweet spot, right? So ignore that bit, which is a shame because animal died, blah blah blah. Lots of them, they're sustainable, thankfully, but this bit at the back is the awesome stuff. Now it's quite thick, it's quite dense, which it needs to be because it's naturally waterproof, which is good for us because it gives us the buoyancy. And it's quite thick, right? So to get in there with a pair of scissors, it can be, you're hacking, or you're taking off a bit too much. And these things are brilliant. So these ones are, Cooksil does them. Everyone does rabbit feet, but the snowshoe, Argentinian snowshoes. Again, I'll zoom in a second. Again, nature spirit stuff. It's kind of not being sold in the UK much anymore, I don't think, because I think Funky was doing them then. I don't know whether they changed contracts or what, I don't know, but they're a bit tougher to get now. So as a single foot, say again. Somebody say something. Somebody say where I can buy some extra.
No, everybody's on mute apart from John.
All right, okay. Oh, and Alois just put in the group as well. Cheers, mate. That hook compared to the ones you described, Gareth. Oh, right, cool. So Alois is actually in the chat. Put a, what is that? Ah, sweet. Yeah, there you go. The living lava. So yeah, or the living nymph. So this is a Sprite hook. So you asked about the longer, or we talked about the longer hook. So hopefully you can see on my screen at the minute. It'll be captured probably in the screen share for later. This is pretty much, so you've got the TMC 200, again, 2X, I think 2X, 3X, 3 extensions, right? Hopefully you can see on the screen there, then you've got, so this is the Sprite Living Nymph, yeah? Did I get that right? So again, what we're looking for is similar gauge, sort of similar size, because, the gauge of the wire is key there, but you've got the length. So you're not going to get, a sunk fly because of the thick gauge on a larger hook, but you've got a longer hook, but in the same gauge size, I suppose. Okay. So cheers, Alex. That's awesome, mate. Brilliant. Perfect. Okay. So the tip I was talking about then. So if we turn that pad, the actual foot around, right? When you look at it straight on, you've got the two toenails, right? If you take a knife, get it down in there and split it, then you can open this foot up. And all right, it doesn't really look great. My dog loves the smell of these when I'm doing it. But what it does mean, you can get to that section a lot easier with your scissors than if you were to go in on a foot that isn't split. So you'll know if you see my room and you go in the boxes, all the feet that are still together are fresh and new. I haven't touched them. The ones that look ragged are the ones I'm using, right? So that's the buoyancy aid, great. And then we're going to use different parts of the hare's face. One part is the body, one part is the thorax, right? So we'll use the mask and the mask fibers, the guard fibers for the thorax, and for the body, we can also use superfine if you want, right? So I'll come on to that in a minute as to why you might want to chop and choose. So 1 second, let me switch my camera, pop the light on. So I'm going to usually go for a 14 in this. If I'm fishing fast water, you know, fast water that even a snowshoe hare emerger is going to struggle, then I'll opt for some sort of like, you know, Klinkhamer or something I know ain't gonna sink at all. And again, I do love a Klinkhamer, but I reserve those really for really fast waters or small streams, which I still fish a lot of. So, okie dokie. Let me sort this bobbin holder out a second. Perfect. Right, so I'm just going to enter the thread. This is the last fly for tonight. Hopefully we've managed to give a couple of things away for you to take away. That's good. So you're going to enter the thread, and I'm going to sort of I'm just going to lay the thread again, right? Because I'm going to be putting stuff on top of it in a minute. And I take it down to the curve, and I'm just going to bring it back up in open turns, right? And the only reason I'm doing that is solely for my material in a minute not to slip around, right? Because while I'm tying with like gel spun thread as it is, and you know, it can be a bit slippy just by its nature anyway. Kevin, Foxton's a black brown light grey dun. Okay, they're probably going to sell out tonight then. Thanks, Kevin. That's awesome. Thanks, mate. Again, in the chat, Kevin's mentioned Foxton's are black brown and light grey dun. So awesome. So yeah, if you can get the things, then they're superb. And again, for what are they? I've got no prices on them for 4 or 5 quid, is it? You know, you get a lot of flies out of them. Unless you're on orders, then they're going to go pretty quick. So I'm going to take my split snowshoe foot, and what I'm going to do, I'm just looking at the fibers, or rather the inner bit. Let's not show you the cartilage and the horrible bits. This is the bit I'm after, right? All up in there, all right? And I'm going to take a pinch. I'm going to snip it, but I'm not going to tie it straight on as is, because again, there are a lot of guard fibers and whatnot. Hang on, I'm jumping a bit ahead of the gun a second. Excuse me. So first off, the body. So I'm just going to take a couple of pinches of this hare's mask. Okay, I'm just going to enter that onto the thread, and I'm just going to start to form a dubbing rope. Yeah, apologies, got a bit ahead of myself then. Excited. Kevin's fault. He mentioned the snowshoe, so I just went straight for it. Okay, so notice where my thread is, and I'm going to put on a rope. And I'm going to start wrapping backwards. But I want this section to be I want it to be the thicker section, okay? Notice that I've purposely made this bit a bit skinnier because I want that to be the thinner end. Let me bring that back up a second. Okay, and again, another pinch. And I'm taking from I'll probably show you later, just under the ears. So again, this is the softer stuff, but it gives us, you know, some nice soft fur. And again, take it down, and if I've got too much on, you can just simply tease it off, and you're good. Then I'm going to bring this through the thread, and I'm going to bring it back up the body in open turns. And this is going to be my rib. So if I was using a darker thread, then this would show up, and I can actually see that as a rib. You probably can't there. But I don't want too much, as Bob mentions in his book, right? And I think he was on the Fly Tying podcast, the Fly Culture podcast. I think the year before last-ish. And he did a great talk on some of these patterns. And what he said was he kind of wants this bit to puncture and pierce the surface, right? That's the whole point of it, because it sits almost like that in the water, right? He wants that butt to be visible in the film to the fish. That's the trapped bit. So what I tend to do is give this a bit of a trim. I don't want it too spiky, because then that's just gonna, you know, make it a little bit tougher for that to pierce the surface. So this is where your superfines can come in quite handy, right? Because they are, you know, well, by the very nature of the word, they're superfine. They are going to have no problem in puncturing or piercing a surface film. However, because they're naturally so buoyant, sometimes they have a trouble doing that. But some people have said, well, I've got these hooks. This pattern keeps sinking because, of course, remember, this stuff is going to take on water. So it is going to sink. Now, we want that to happen. But if you're using a thick gauge hook, then it might bring the whole fly under, right? So this is where, you know, balance, and this is different for everybody, and depending on the hooks that you use and the materials you use on the hook, you might get pulled down too quickly. So if you're finding that does happen, switch it out and swap it for superfine, right? Easy. And generally that will stop it from sinking too much. So again, that balance, that fine line between piercing the surface and sinking, you know, you're kind of missing the point then of what the fly is trying to do. And again, you might get maybe a bit of drag on the fly, and you'll find that is enough to pull the fly under. And then it's drowned, and then you've got to dry it off again, and it just becomes, you know, why the hell am I using this fly? And then you lose faith in the fly, and, you know, slippery slope. There you go. So there you go. I'm just going to give it a bit of a haircut, and then that's good. So now I'm going to bring this forward a little bit. Just going to rotate that in the vise, make it a bit easier for me. And I'm going to take, sorry, back to my rabbit foot. And I'm just going to take a pinch out. Now what I'm going to do is snip it. So this is now easier to do because I take the fur from, you know, not the outside of the foot, because that's all the soft fur. I want to get into the gold stuff in the middle. So I'm just going to cut it. I just need to transfer fingers. You know, you notice by default, it's very spiky, right? So I'm just going to look at the material, and I'm just going to pull out some of those guard fibers, right? Because again, they're not what I want. You could probably leave them in. At the end of the day, it's not going to affect the fly too much, but I want it to look nice as well. Good. Okay, so again, length of the wing for the length of the hook. So again, I'm just gonna measure it and maneuver it, and then just give it a pinch and loop. And again, because I'm using this nano silk, it should be fairly strong, right? I can really lay into this. And I'm just going to bring that forward. I'm just going to give a couple of wraps behind, and then I'm going to just park it there. Just one more wrap on top. Okay, now I'm going to brush the whole lot up a second, because this is in no way finished, right? It's going to look messy for a while, and a lot of people think it looks messy at the end as well, but messy is good, right? It's one thing I like to think of with flies is keep them controlled mess, right? You know, as a fly dresser, we kind of try to stay in control. That's what we're after. So now I'm taking out more of the guard hairs from the hair mask.
The wing, as it looks right now, Gareth, inspires me a bit to use it for like a mayfly.
Yeah,
A mayfly wing as well. So you have the big wing and the small wings in the back.
yeah, that's it. You know, and adapt it for what you're targeting, right? You could be, I imagine you could do bigger DHEs or SHEs, and you could use those for mayfly. Yeah, you're absolutely right. Up the size.
Is this the normal length of the fiber you use there, or is there fibers that are a bit longer available as well on the foot? For the front, we're actually going to trim this back bit, but I'm going to leave it there for the moment, and you'll see why in a second, hopefully. So this is a tip I got from Kev, funny enough.
So I'm just going to take my guard fibers and I'm just going to tease them up and in. Now you could use squirrel as well for this, but I find it's a bit too skinny, I suppose. So again, I'm just going to, now what I can do, this is a fresh mask from last weekend. But what you can do, you'll notice my head is shaved. So if you don't mind using the same razor, then you can use that razor to shave the face of the mask as well, of the hair. Don't tell you, missus. Okay, so we can add more. So I'm just going to leave that for now. Again, too much in there, then we've got a problem to sort. And we will need more. So I'm just going to bring this up. Again, what I want is a bit of mess here. And then again, at the end, if you want to, you can trim it. So that's perfect. Okay, so hopefully you can see that's done the job. So I'm just going to lift this up. I'm just going to give a couple of wraps behind, right? So this is the thoracic area. Again, I want to kick that up. And this is Kev's tip that he showed me the other week. So what we're doing is in front and behind. That's not too bad, actually. If I was being really critical, I would say I need a tiny bit more on the front. You can see a little bit there. What we'll do, I'll say that I meant to do that, and it's going to be a head. There we go. Got out of jail. It could do with like a fraction of a mil more dubbing, but that's fine. So I'm just unspinning again. I'm just checking with my needle that's got to the point I want. There you go. There's me building the head. Perfect. Exactly as I meant. It's not as I meant, but there we are. And again, there we go. So I'm just going to bring this forward now. I'm just going to look for those tags. I'm just going to go in with my scissors and I'm just going to leave a stump there, but I don't want it too long. Okay. So as Kev put it, that's going to give you the buoyancy and a bit more buoyancy on the back, so it doesn't sort of like, rotate too much. And if I turn this around, so let me just check this. I'm going to go in and just give this a bit of a rough up. And again, if some of these are too long, you can just give them a tease out. That, gentlemen, is probably one of the best sort of searching flies. Again, from underneath, that is just the messiest fritter that you can imagine there. So again, it's faster water as well. Perfect. Some of the slower waters, yeah, fine. But generally, this, between that and that CDC midge emerger, they're really the only kind of flies I tend to use. There are a couple more. I think in one of the past demos we did the CDC and elk cripple, which is simply exactly the same as the CDC and elk, but instead of the rear facing wing, it's tied forward more like a shuttlecock, and it acts just as that. So you've got a messy sort of CDC body, loads of bits going everywhere. And then as a forward facing wing, just as we've tied in the CDC tonight, you've got deer hair. That's also a great pattern. Again, 2 materials, right? So it's really nice and simple. And then probably my go-to for last year, a buddy and I fished a lot together last year, Alex, and he's a big fan of the Iobo, or the It Ought to Be Outlawed. Dave Southall's pattern. Did he design that? I think he might have. That, because of last year's sort of low water, warm water, fish really lethargic, and they weren't moving for much. So when that was presented, right, I think that was the fly of the year, if I'm honest. But again, I think the older I'm sort of getting, the less I sort of actually worry about the flies so much now. Don't get me wrong. I love fly tying in its own right. Always will, always have. But my flies, I think, over the last 5 years, 10 years, have got a lot more practical, or maybe that's the wrong word. More focused on the trout then, and what do they expect to see? Because I still love a nice parachute. I love hackles, big rooster hackle fun, and they're fantastic. They've got their own place. Don't get me wrong, I've still got boxes full, but I don't know. You just seem to have these cycles in fishing life, don't you, where you sort of gravitate to certain patterns. And these patterns specifically are, you know, I'm using more and more and more. They're simple to tie, very few ingredients. You know, you can easily run up, you know, a dozen a night before a fishing trip, and you know you've only spent maybe an hour, and then you're focused on the fishing again. So again, practical uses of fishing flies to target trout really is what I now do. So still do a lot of tying, but they're more of these things. But it is nice then when the Danica are on and hatching, and you're looking at specific patterns, mayfly, upwings, all that nice stuff as well. And you need to be hatch specific again then. But again, I tend to sit and watch a lot more now as well. So those generalistic patterns are, you know, you don't have to be hatch specific then as well. So we talked tonight about March brown and Grannom, and really, as long as you've got the same silhouette, the same size, things like that, then fantastic. That's really all you need. But generally, those two hatches, you need something a little bit more specific. But generally, the rest of the year, then you can kind of target any hatch as long as it expects to see food in a place where it expects to see that food and it's drifting naturally. Then again, why wouldn't it eat, right? And there might be another reason why it didn't take. But as long as you can put it there confidently, then you know you've done your job. So there we go. So there's the 4 patterns. Any questions? It's pretty much coming up to bang on 9. If there's any questions? We'll crack on.
Who's the
Anybody wants to
author
chat?
of the book, Gareth?
Which one? The Tying Emergers?
Tying Emergers by
Jim Scholmier and Ted Leeson.
Jim
Ted is,
Schonemeyer.
yeah. But again, that's a cracking book. There you go. Klinkhamer on the front. It's one of my favorites. Absolutely. As I said, I use that when I'm fishing small streams if I can see it a mile off. Not that I'm casting a mile off on small streams, but again, you can see it. You can suspend a nymph under it if you wanted to. Cracking flies. So yeah, those are some of the 4 then that I use early season, throughout the season. Danica come along, I'm looking at specifics. Small flies, again, did a presentation I think on small flies a while back. That's still on YouTube. I think again, there's a lot of credit for small flies and catching fish. Certainly with the weather we're getting year on year, they're getting warmer. We had 2 fishing suspensions last year, 1 fishing suspension the year before because the waters were so warm. Trout welfare came first, which is good. So we called that. And I imagine we're going to have a suspension again this year. So when the temperatures drop below 18 degrees consistently for a number of days consecutively, then yeah, they were so sort of keyed into, right, well, that's food, that's not food. And we found that, you know, you just had to go smaller. And small flies have been a passion of mine for years. Some of the books you can see in the back, tying small flies, micro flies, midge, Ed Engel, some of those Colorado guides. I don't know whether he guides anymore. He was one of the pioneers of the small fly. And again, they work just as well in the right conditions on our waters as well, and still waters as well, right? You still get small midge hatches and things. So yeah, have a play around, guys, and I hope you find it informative, helpful.
Gareth was went angling down another open day this year.
Say once more.
It went angling down another open day like it did last year.
Yes, June the 10th. Hopefully, we're just.
Yes, I want some of them.
I'll bring you a couple.
Cheers,
I've had them
Gareth.
last year.
Oh, Jimmy.
Gareth, you know that first fly you done, the March brown.
Yeah.
Would the sedge caddis be okay? a partridge set catch.
Yeah, mate. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, all I was trying to do there with that pattern is because it's a bigger fly.
Yeah.
Again, back to that conversation, I suppose you still want a longer fly,
Yeah.
but you don't want to add too much weight with
Right,
the
yeah.
gauge hook. So that in a 14, yeah. So you got there you go. So Aloy said you got the Sprite.
Yeah.
What's the partridge one, Tim? I forget.
Sedge caddis.
Sedge caddis, perfect. That's the one with the, is that the up eye?
Straight eye.
Straight. Okay. So that, yeah,
one.
that'll work. I mean, you could use a big grub hook, but
Yeah.
it's just not going to
The
sit
blade,
too right. And
yeah.
because it's shorter hook and curvier, the arse is going to be like right down. It's almost sitting like that. And you want it, you know, flat in the surface because it's at the point where it's trying to crawl free of the shuck.
Yeah.
And it's just trapped. So it could be, as I said, it could be an emerger, it could be a stillborn, cripple, you know, all those easy target phases of that stage of life, really. Yeah, there you go. Easy peasy. And yeah, Rune, awesome, mate. There you go. So the buck time emergers, there you go, on Amazon as well. There you go. Yeah, it's a good book. I mean, there's lots of good fly tying books. There's just only so much time to read them, isn't it? But probably I'm gonna take that one back downstairs. I've not read it for a while, so I'm gonna have a glass of wine and read that instead.
Gareth, I'll give you a ring if you're out a week on Saturday, because I'm not out Friday, but I'll be out on the Saturday.
Yeah, let me know where. Come join us, mate.
Yeah. All right.
Gareth, have you got that one?
Sorry, 2 seconds. I'm pinned. 2 seconds. I don't unpin me.